Hey everyone, Hammer Dan here with Hammer Performance. So today we're going to kick off our episode 1 of our trilogy here, I guess, on doing a super street drag bike build. We have my old hot street bike from back in the AHDRA days. At one point in time we were going to turn it into a 90-inch big bore kit build, but we decided to go on a little different route. We want to show or do a somewhat economical build with this bike and set it up with one of our 1275 kits and continue to build the chassis and whatnot. So we're going to do episodes, walk you through step by step. Hope you guys follow along. But we'll go through the whole process from start to finish on building the bike. This is episode 1, and in episode 1 we're going to go ahead and assemble the flywheel crankshaft assembly here. As you can see over here, we are going with I have a set of S&S flywheels that we're going to use with S&S shafts, S&S crankpin, and Carrillo rods. The rods I had from a previous build. I purchased the S&S flywheels, I think last year, for the purpose of building the race bike. And so today we're going to go ahead and assemble the flywheels, show you how we're going to assemble the flywheels and everything, and get that ready to go in the bike. So again, episode 1, assembling the flywheels. This is going to be a no wheelie barred bike. We have a stretch swing arm. We'll show you the chassis on down the road and kind of go through that when we get to that point. But currently right now we'll get the flywheels done and then move on to the prepping the cases as episode number 2 and getting the cases all ready to go to accept the flywheels. So today we're going to assemble the flywheels. First thing we're going to want to do is install our shafts, our pinion shaft and our motor sprocket shaft into the S&S flywheel halves. S&S sends directions on torque specs for their shafts. As you can see here under the Sportster model, we're looking at the sprocket shaft, 340 to 360 foot-pounds. Pinion shaft, 85 and up for the Sportster models. Again, 340 to 360 foot-pounds. That's pretty hefty there. So, first thing we're going to want to do now, just to figure it out on our pinion shaft here, we do have an oiling hole. We also have an oiling hole in the flywheel half there. I don't know if you can see that. Those have to match up. On the motor sprocket shaft, we don't have an oil hole, so that kind of depicts which shaft goes where. We have a keyway and we have a nut. You want to make sure, now we've already cleaned and prepped everything, so it's ready to go just to save a little bit of time on the video. But you want to make sure your mounting areas are very clean. You can use some brake clean to clean them up and whatnot, and make sure we have nothing on there. We're going to be using some green Loctite, 640 green press fit Loctite. It's very, very strong, hard to get off once we put it on. Couple things to point out as well. If we take a look at our S&S nuts that we're going to use here, there is a washer type embedded into that nut. If you can see that, that faces the flywheel. We don't have one on this side, so that flat needs to go against the flywheel when we assemble. So first thing we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to go ahead and put some green Loctite on our threads here. We want to make sure we get enough on there. Okay. Okay, once we do that, we're going to put in our keyway. Sometimes these can be a little bit of a pita to get in there. Once you get it in like that, you're going to take your flywheel half here, put it in there with the keyway, kind of tap it in. We'll leave that like that. Then we're going to take green Loctite on the nut. Like that. We'll start this again, the washer side that's embedded down towards the flywheel. Getting it on there. There we go. Okay, we'll come over here. Be very careful when we put this down, like that. We're gonna grab our torque wrench. We have a monster torque wrench. Again, 350 foot-pounds is what we're shooting for. We have that number on here. I don't know if you can see it on there a little bit, but we'll get this snugged up tight here real quick first. Okay, there we go. Okay, so if you look down on here, this is a big one. So max is at 350 on half. So that's, we want to push the orange to the 350. We have our black on there. So Ross, you want to give me a hand here real quick? I'll take it out, so I'll have Ross hold it. Can you hold this while I turn it? I'm going to go ahead and turn it to 350. Just kind of hold this down so she doesn't come off of there. We're going to turn this to 350. Okay, come back. We can even get it there. Did we get it? There you go. Okay, so we touch the 350 mark. Yeah, pulls the device out of there. So we'll go reset this. Okay, there we go. We got that half done. So we'll go ahead and set this down. Okay, and the next one. Green Loctite on there. Green on the threads. Oh. We'll go ahead and put our keyway in there, like that. Like that. Again, we're putting this nut with the flat side down against the flywheel half. Okay. We'll stick that one in there. Yep, okay. So Ross, if you want to come on that side. So we'll move that down again so it's at about 300 because we want to push it to 350. Let me go ahead and let this one go on here. Okay. Okay, you want to hold it. Okay, it was 350. Passed it, perfect. Okay, so we got that one. That was a lot easier. Oh, I'll leave that. Okay. So there we go. We got our shafts in. Pretty straightforward, and a lot of this is kind of the same now from this point on. A lot of this is kind of the same on rebuilding a stock crank if it's a rebuildable one with nuts and it's not a pressed together. Pressed togethers on the Sportsters 2000 and later were all pressed together. 99 and earlier were all rebuildable, so they can be rebuilt. If we do rebuild them, especially the earlier model Sportster cranks, we'll go ahead and use an S&S crank pin, swap out the cages to a set of aluminum cages, and put new flats in the whole 9 yards when we rebuild them, whether we're using Carrillo rods or just rebuilding the stock rods and whatnot. So from this point here, we're going to go ahead and put our crank pin in. We got our two nuts and our keyway. see here. So our crank pin, again, you want to clean it really, really well. We have the key here. So we'll put that key in. If you look at our two flywheel halves, one has a keyway on the pinion shaft and the other does not. So that's very important to keep note of. When we go to true up the crank, we use a brass mallet to kind of pound if we're scissored at all. And so when we do that with the brass mallet, we want to make sure that we're pounding on the motor sprocket shaft side and not the pinion shaft side, because that has a keyway, so to be able to move them. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and put our crank pin in. Again, make sure your key is in there. Surface areas are clean. I'm going to slide that right down into the keyway slot. Actually, let's do this first. Let's take that back out with our keyway. Let's put green Loctite on there first. Like that. Again, these nuts have a flat as well and a not flat side. The flat side is going to go towards the crank assembly, or the flywheel half. Like that. Okay, now we can go ahead with the key. Okay. Make sure that flat is down. Got that nice and tight. We're going to go ahead and set it in our stand here. Okay, now if we look at the instructions from S&S over here, the crank pin nut, we're looking at 290 to 310 foot-pounds for the S&S shaft. Of course, this is a street build, racing build. So for racing, we can go all the way up to 350 again on this. Okay, the pinion shaft on the racing side of things, you're looking at 350 to 400. We went to 350 on that, so we're on the low side. So we don't strip the nuts, and then the pinion shaft 200 to 250. So went a little bit tighter on that. So we're good there. Our crank pin, we're looking at about 350 as well on that. Now you have to be a little bit careful here, because if you tighten down your crank pin nuts too tight, then you lose your end play on your connecting rods in there, okay, your side-to-side end play. And I believe we want at least 15 thou, 20 thou of end play in there, roughly in there. So you got to be careful on how tight. So we're going to go to our minimums here on this crank pin nut at 350 there. That's pretty heavy. And again, we will go ahead at some point and probably just tack the nut to make sure it doesn't come out once we get it trued up and everything. So we'll go ahead and torque this. Ross, if I can get a hand again here real quick. We're going to try and hit that 350 mark. So let's just snug her down. Let's keep going from there. Okay. Okay. Okay, so there we have it. Now, we're going to go ahead and flip this. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and assemble our bearings and everything in here. So, let's talk about measurements and sizes. We measured our inside bore of our Carrillo rods, the male and female, and since they've been used already, we've come up with, they're about a half thou bigger than what Carrillo sends them out at, which is a 1.625 bore size. So these are at about a 1.6255 bore size, so we're a half thou bigger than what they were sent out at. So they do, the bushings in there, or the races in there, they do kind of harden and compact as it gets ran. So we're about a half thou big there. We went with a 1 thou bigger on the crank pin. Okay, so if we do the math, and we can grab a calculator to kind of do the math here, just to kind of show you what kind of tolerance. So what we're looking for, at least what I'm looking for in a race bike application for a bearing fit, I'm looking for about roughly a thou, roughly in there, 1,000th of an inch of play in there for our bearings. The manual, I believe, calls for, if you look into a stock manual on rebuilding a crank, I believe it's 0.7 of a thou to 1.5 thou is normally the tolerance there. I'm shooting for a thou, maybe a little bit on the looser side for a race bike application. So if we do the math here and we say we have 1.6255, that's our outside diameter of our smallest portion of our races here, or of our bushings here for the rods, and we minus the crank pin, which we measured the crank pin at 1.250. That gives us 0.3755 left over. We've measured our bearings. These are standard bearings, and the standard bearing size is 0.1872 is what we measured on all of our bearings. So if we minus 0.1872 equals, and then we have to minus it again because you have a bearing on each side, so minus 0.1872, it gives us 1.1 thou, okay? That's perfect, that's right where we want to be, okay? 1/10 of a thou over 1,000th of an inch of clearance on our bearing clearance there. So we've already done the math to set up just to kind of cut down on video time to show you, but basically a bore gauge on your rods to figure out your size, mark down your sizes there, and then a micrometer to go ahead and measure your bearings, and then a micrometer to measure your pin diameter. Okay, they do have different pin diameters. They have a thou over, they have standard size, they have numerous different bearing sizes that are usually a thou or two over, or 1/10 over, depending on what we're looking for to do the math. So we've already done the math. This is where we need to be. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, we have aluminum cages here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get some red line assembly lube here on our cages. So we have a small, and then we have our big in the middle for the big bearings. And then another small. This is a little tedious to get these bearings in here, but just take your time if you're rebuilding a crank at home or whatnot. So, okay, at that point we're going to start down here with our small bearings. I'm just going to fit one in at a time. One in each slot as we rotate around. The red line assembly lube will help the bearings stay into place so they don't fall out on you. So on the flywheel halves, these are S&S race flywheels. Sad part is S&S doesn't make these flywheels anymore for the Buells. They now just make a basic standard flywheel for the Sportsters. If I remember talking to them, I could still get that. But if you want it lightened, knife edged, all that good stuff for a racing application, we suggest going to Dark Horse. Speaking to John over at Dark Horse over there for those operations. You can buy the S&S flywheel for the Sportster from S&S. Okay, we got our bottom row, so now we're moving on to the big bearings for the top row. But you can buy a Sportster crank and then send it to Dark Horse and have them knife edge it, lighten it for you. All the good things we would want in a race bike application. Bigger bearings are a lot easier to put in there. Again, make sure everything's clean if you're doing this, but this is our first step here for the Super Street race bike build. Okay, there's our row of big bearings. Now our last row of small bearings. Oh, I take that back. I missed a big bearing somewhere. Good. Maybe I didn't. Did I get an extra bearing? We got an extra bearing in there. All right, make sure we got them all. Does look like it. Make sure we got big ones in every one. Make sure we got bearings in every one on the bottom. Okay. Now, once we got all our bearings in there, you're going to want to clean the top. Really well here. Okay, now we're going to take our rod halves. And I gotta remember here, let's take a look. Walk over here, let me grab this crank just to make sure. What do we do with that crank? So you want to just make sure the direction that you have here, here's another crank that we had for a previous project. You want to make sure that your big end is pointing in the proper direction. So on the pinion shaft side, we have our big end, and as you can see on the connecting rods here, your big end swoops back. It's got an offset to it. Okay, so we want the offset back, okay, because of our 45 on the way it sits, and you want the big end facing forward. Okay, so just make sure your orientation is right. So we'll come back over here. We'll make sure our orientation is right. So that's the motor sprocket side. So it should fit like this. Has to go on there like this. So you can take both your rods, put it together. You're going to slide down your bottom over your bearings. Be very careful. You got to kind of jiggle it around a little bit to make sure that everything kind of slides right down and that no bearings pop out like that. Okay, there we have it. Okay. Now, again, we're going to come back, just make sure we're clean as we do this here on the top. And then we're going to go with some green Loctite inside this nut here. We're going to go with some green Loctite around here. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to put our other half on. So we'll slide it right down on there, like that. Center it the best we can there. Like that. We want to make sure that we're cleared all the way around. Okay, so before we really torque that nut down, next thing we want to do here is we want to take our truing piece here, stick this on here. This is going to kind of move our flywheel halves best we can together. Hold them in that spot. Okay, so we'll do that. And then we're going to come back and snug this nut just a little bit here. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and snug this one more time. Okay, now at this time, since we've kind of snugged this really good, we got our nut snugged on there really good. We're going to go ahead and torque that down. So Ross, if you want to come give us a hand again here. Okay, no, let's just keep going.
300.
Okay. Okay, there we have it. So now, I'm going to go ahead and remove this. You know, this tool here just gets us close. You know, we'll see what it actually comes out at. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes it's really, really close and you got just some minor tweaking with it to get it right. Sometimes it's off a little bit and you got to bang on it for a while to get it correct, okay? What we like to do on our race bike, in a race bike application, building a crankshaft, what we like to do is we like to taper it in about 1/1000th of an inch, okay? Roughly 1/1000th of an inch there. Reason being, at high RPMs, with this thing running to 8,000 RPMs on a consistent basis down the drag strip, we're gonna get flywheel spread. And when we get flywheel spread like that, it can cause havoc on your pinion shaft, on your motor sprocket shaft, over a period of time. So if we cock it in 1,000 at higher RPMs, when we get that spread, it spreads true, okay? So we like to canter it in about 1/1000th of an inch so that at spread at high RPMs, it actually comes into true and not goes way past it from that point. So let's go ahead and take her over to the truing stand and let's just take a peek at where we're at here. Get that in there. Now, even though we put these on here, what we've come to realize is these aren't the most accurate in the world. So we also like to put a dial indicator on there as well. We'll move these out towards the end here. Move this one out towards the end here. But we'll just take a peek here at these just to see where we're at. So that one looks probably about 3 thou over there, and this one's probably about 4 thou over here, roughly. So not too bad. Let's put a dial indicator on it and see. If we can just slide that out of the way. Ross, will you grab me a pair of pliers, please? Thank you. Okay, we'll just zero this out. Just get a better reading of where we're at there. Oh, so we're about 7 thou. 7 thou on this side, it looks like. And let's see, the high side is to this side. So the back side is the high side. So our 0 is the high side. So if we go to 0, we're almost halfway between our nut here, our crank pin. So that means we're scissored a little bit, actually quite a bit there. And it looks like we're pinched in, no, we're spread out at the bottom just a tick, but more than anything scissored here is what it's telling us as we look. So to our high side right there, we're almost 90 degrees to the pin, which tells us we're we're scissors. Let's go ahead and slide it over to this other side. Take a look there. So if we bring it over here, like that, and we just zero that out roughly, just to get a reference. Again, about 1/7 thou on the nose over here as well. And let's see, our high side is to the right of 0. So our high side's about right there. So again, we're about the same spot on the other side type deal. So we're scissored. We need to go ahead and kind of bang on it to get it back into true this way a little bit. And so what we'll do is we'll use a brass hammer and go ahead and bang on, again, opposite of our pinion shaft, the motor sprocket shaft. Since it doesn't have the keyway, that's the side you want to bang on. So we'll go ahead and do that. The other thing we want to do as well, let's take a look over here. So we got to true it. We know we got some truing to do. We'll bring this back over here. The other thing we're going to want to do is check our end play. Let me grab, feeler gauges. We have feeler gauges. Do we have a group of them? I think they're, Alex, are they on your desk in there?
It's a difference.
Oh, let me see. You have a set? Okay. Okay, so we want to check our end play here with feeler gauge. So I just slid everything to one side. 28 is too tight. So I want to say it's probably about a 26 thou, which I believe puts us right in the middle. Yep, 26 thou. And I believe the spec, if I remember, is like 15 to 35. I think S&S has it a little bit tighter than that. I don't know, I don't remember where it says in here, but I think if just off of memory, 15 to 30 or 35, and we're at 26. So we're good to go on our end play there. That's good. Again, at this point, we're going to go ahead and pause the video to true it up. Truing it up is the last thing we got to do. Once we true it up, we should be good to go. Again, we're going to try and canter it in about 1/1000 of an inch so that when we get the flywheel spread, it spreads true again at higher RPMs. Other than that, this concludes episode 1 of building the crankshaft assembly for our Super Street drag bike. Stay tuned for episode 2. We're going to go ahead and prep the cases, put a windage tray in, some external oil lines, fittings in the bottom of the cases, and what else were we going to do there? Clearance the cam box, all those things that we need to do before we're ready to go ahead, change the races out, before we're ready to go ahead and put the flywheel in. So again, we'll go ahead and true this up. May take us a little while to bang around back on and off the truing stand to get it right, but we're going to set it up thou cantered in. Other than that, stay tuned for episode 2 coming your way on our way to building the Super Street drag bike. Follow us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our channel. Peace out.